Hey everyone, welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be taking a look at something you might not expect. The book of Deuteronomy, specifically chapter 7.
Yeah,
We're going to be going deep on this one.
absolutely.
When you think about Deuteronomy, you think about ancient history.
Right.
But we're going to see if this text, often viewed as,
Yeah.
just purely historical, if it has any relevance for us in modern times.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to me how these ancient texts can still speak to us today. I mean, you look
Yeah.
at Deuteronomy 7, on the surface it seems to be about, Israelites entering the promised land,
Right.
but it's really about so much more than that when you start digging deeper.
Yeah. So set the scene for us. What's happening in Deuteronomy 7?
Well, the Israelites are on the verge of entering the promised land, this land that God has promised them.
Right.
But there's a catch. The land is already inhabited.
Oh.
And God's instructions are pretty stark.
Okay.
Conquer the land and eliminate the existing inhabitants who are considered wicked and idolatrous.
Wow, that's pretty intense.
Hmm.
It seems almost unthinkable in our modern context.
It absolutely is. But it's crucial to understand the historical context here. This was a time when conquering land and asserting dominance was the norm. We can't impose our modern values on these ancient societies.
So how do we even begin to make sense of this in a way that resonates with us today?
Well, if we can look beyond the literal interpretation,
Okay.
we can start to see some universal themes that I think still resonate with us today. Themes of identity, purpose, staying true to your values in a world that's constantly trying to pull you in different directions.
Right. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So you're saying that even though the context is vastly different, the underlying human struggles are still relevant.
Exactly. The Israelites saw themselves as God's chosen people, set apart, destined for greatness. But that came with a huge responsibility to stay true to God's laws and avoid anything that could lead them astray.
And if they did stay faithful, there were some pretty serious benefits, right?
Absolutely. God promised blessings, fertility, prosperity, military victory in exchange for their loyalty. It was almost like a divine contract. You be loyal to me and I'll make sure you thrive.
Okay, so we've got this idea of chosenness,
Right.
of staying true to your beliefs and of reaping the rewards of faithfulness.
Right.
But how does any of this translate to our lives in the 21st century? I mean, we're not conquering lands or building altars anymore.
That's the exciting part. The beauty of these ancient texts is that they offer timeless wisdom that can be applied to our modern challenges. The question is, how do we translate these ancient concepts into a language that speaks to our modern experience?
Right.
You know?
Okay.
Yeah, let's take the concept of chosenness, for example. In the ancient world, it was often tied to lineage, to belonging to a specific tribe or nation.
Right.
But in our modern, more individualistic society, it takes on a different meaning.
So instead of being chosen by God or by birth, we have to choose ourselves.
In a way, yes, it's about recognizing our own unique gifts, talents, and passions. It's about figuring out what we're meant to do in this world and committing to it wholeheartedly.
I like that. It's not about claiming superiority over others,
Right.
but about owning our own individuality and
Yeah.
purpose.
Exactly. And just like the Israelites were warned against idolatry, worshiping false gods,
Right.
we also face our own modern-day idols.
Okay, give us some examples. What kind of idols are we talking about here?
Well, think about it. The relentless pursuit of wealth and material possessions, the obsession with fame and recognition, the need to be constantly connected and validated through social media.
It's like we're sacrificing our time, energy, and even our values on the altar of these modern-day idols.
Precisely. And it's not that these things are inherently bad, but it's about keeping them in perspective. It's about asking ourselves, are these things serving me or am I serving them?
Right.
Are they helping me live a more fulfilling life or are they pulling me further and further away from my true self?
That's a really good point. It's so easy to get caught up in the hustle and bustle of modern life and lose sight of what really matters. So how do we stay true to ourselves, to our values, in a world that's constantly bombarding us with distractions and conflicting messages?
Well, Deuteronomy 7 also emphasizes the importance of remembering. Remembering God's past faithfulness, the miracles he performed, the ways he delivered them from slavery. It was a way of cultivating gratitude and reinforcing their faith.
So it's like keeping a gratitude journal, but on a much grander scale.
You could say that, but the principle is the same. Taking the time to reflect on the good things in our lives, to acknowledge the times we've been supported, guided, or protected, even when we didn't realize it.
I can see how that would be powerful.
Hmm.
Shifting our focus from what we lack to what we have. From fear and scarcity to gratitude and abundance.
Exactly. And that's where we start to tap into that inner strength and resilience that Deuteronomy 7 is all about. It's not about ignoring our fears or pretending everything is perfect, but about acknowledging them, putting them into perspective, and choosing to move forward with courage and trust.
Trust in ourselves or trust in something bigger than ourselves.
Both, actually. The Israelites believed they couldn't conquer the promised land on their own. They needed God's help. And in our own lives, we often try to do everything ourselves to be completely self-sufficient. But that can be incredibly exhausting and ultimately unsustainable.
So it's like trying to push a boulder uphill all by yourself. Eventually, you're going to need some help.
Exactly. Recognizing our limitations and allowing ourselves to receive support guidance or even just a listening ear can make all the difference. And that support can come from a variety of sources. Our faith, our community, our loved ones, even a therapist or a mentor.
It's about surrendering the illusion of control and embracing the power of collaboration and connection.
And that brings us back to the core message of Deuteronomy 7, finding strength in connection, both within ourselves and with something larger than ourselves. We weren't meant to do this thing called life alone. We need each other, and we need something to believe in, something that gives us hope, purpose, and the courage to face whatever challenges come our way.
You know, we've covered a lot of ground here. Chosenness, modern-day idols, finding strength and connection. But there's another element of Deuteronomy 7 that I think feels really relevant today, this idea of purity, of keeping the faith and the culture from being contaminated.
Yeah, it's interesting how this concept of purity played out in their daily lives. It wasn't simply about physical cleanliness, but it extended to maintaining a clear distinction between themselves and other nations. It was all about safeguarding their unique identity and way of life.
So in a sense, they were erecting boundaries, not just physical ones to keep invaders out,
Right.
but cultural and spiritual ones to prevent outside influences from corrupting their beliefs.
Exactly. And while that may seem extreme in our modern interconnected world, there's a valuable principle at play here. What we allow into our minds and hearts does shape who we become.
Right. It's like that old saying, you are what you eat,
Yeah.
but for the soul, right?
Yuck.
If we're constantly bombarded with negativity, whether it's, doom scrolling the news, toxic gossip, or even violent entertainment, it's bound to impact us on some level.
Absolutely. Our minds are like gardens. If we plant seeds of negativity, fear, and judgment, that's what will grow.
Right.
But if we cultivate a space for beauty, inspiration, and kindness, that's what we'll reap.
So it's not about living in a bubble or becoming hermits, but about being conscious curators of our mental and emotional landscape.
Precisely. It's about making deliberate choices about what we read, watch, listen to, and even who we spend our time with. It's about setting boundaries, saying no to things that deplete us, and yes, to experiences that nourish our spirits and align with our values.
It's like we're the bouncers at the nightclub of our minds, making sure only the VIPs get in.
I love that analogy. It underscores the power we have to shape our experiences. We're not passive recipients of the world around us,
Right.
but active creators of our reality.
So, if the Israelites viewed themselves as a people set apart, dedicated to a specific way of life, how can we find that sense of purpose and belonging in the 21st century? I mean, we're not building altars or making sacrifices in the literal sense,
Right.
but are there modern equivalents?
That's a question each of us has to answer for ourselves.
Yeah.
But I think if we look at the principles behind those ancient practices, devotion, sacrifice, gratitude, connection, we can find ways to express those values in our own lives.
So instead of animal sacrifices, perhaps it's about sacrificing our time and energy to things that truly matter.
Yeah.
Our relationships, our communities, our passions.
Exactly. And instead of building physical altars, maybe it's about creating sacred spaces in our lives, whether it's through meditation, spending time in nature, or simply carving out quiet moments for reflection and gratitude.
It's about finding rituals and practices that ground us, connect us to something bigger than ourselves, and remind us of what truly matters.
And it's about asking ourselves, what am I building with my life? What legacy am I creating?
Those are powerful questions.
Yeah.
And I think that's the magic of diving into these ancient texts. They challenge us to think differently, to question our assumptions, and to connect with something timeless and profound.
Absolutely. And while we may not agree with everything in Deuteronomy 7, we can still appreciate the wisdom it offers about the human condition, the challenges we face, and the choices we make.
As we wrap up our deep dive, I want to leave you with this. What does it mean for you to be set apart in the 21st century? What makes you unique?
Right.
What are you called to do? And how can you create a life that reflects your truest self?
Keep exploring those questions. The answers might surprise you.
Thank you for joining us on this fascinating journey. Until next time, keep diving.